I picked up Final Fantasy XIV at the perfect time. This is not to say it was a good time in my life, though. I had tried and failed to get into the game in 2021, and ended up letting it gather dust on my hard drive. I played and replayed other installments in the franchise, living each and every moment that I could steal away from myself in the years since then. It was during the summer of 2024 that I really fell back into Final Fantasy as a whole. In late February, shortly after starting this channel actually, my grandpa's cancer occurred, and with a new prognosis, terminal stage 4 cancer. Into the spring and through the summer, my family had to come to terms with a lot. It was an incredibly difficult year, as I had to accept that the family member I was closest to was to die while graduating from university and dealing with a deluge of separate personal issues. It was in October that this all came to a head. My grandpa spent his last week in the hospital surrounded by family. We were there all day, every day, laughing and talking and reflecting with him. Up until the very end, he was the witty, charismatic old man that I confided in and respected and adored. Even the nurses tending to him shed tears when he chose to peacefully pass via morphine. He had made his peace with death, and on the 26th, he was gone. The grief was all-consuming. I threw myself into working full-time at a job that I hated, trying my hardest to work through the fog that clouded my brain. Most of my thoughts were drowning in the profound feeling of loss that made my heart feel like lead. Not even replaying Final Fantasy XV, my favorite game ever, did much to help. I knew what would come to pass in the story. Its somber tone and final chapters felt too reminiscent of my grandpa's diagnosis, too much like the loss I had just endured. I needed something new. So, at the behest of my friends, I logged into 14 in November. Finally, after years of trying and failing, it clicked. In the throes of grief, in the wake of one of the worst years of my life, I felt deeply connected to this game, its story, and the community that surrounds it. This is what Final Fantasy XIV means to me. I started fresh with a canon-compliant joke name and a Mikote I didn't particularly care for. Not fond of casting jobs or Ul'dah, I opted to start in Gridania as a Lancer. I won't harp on how I fell in love with the realm reborn, since I already have a video on it, but I will say that the routine of logging on for main story quest progression was a godsend. In the weeks following my grandpa's passing, I became a bit of a recluse. I barely called anyone, I avoided leaving the house, I flaked on plans. Honestly, I didn't tell most people in my life that I had lost someone so dear to me. My new job as a server began right after Thanksgiving, and it was a hard adjustment. For one, I already dislike jobs that require a lot of socializing, and working as a server is very demanding in that aspect. It is incredibly difficult for me to mask for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 times a week. But this job also reminded me of my old man in little ways. Fresh after my first Thanksgiving without him, I had to serve dishes he liked to strangers who would never know I would have to take breaks to cry in the walk-in freezer. 14 forced me to call my friends for trials and dungeons, dragging me out of the husk of a person that the grief was turning me into. I began to rely on VC for a lot, really. The slower points of A Realm Reborn had me actively seek out calling my friends, which even before 2024 was unusual for me. I was already self-conscious of being on calls, and avoided speaking whenever I could. With 14, I was pushed to overcome this, especially because more than ever I needed that support system. These calls evolved into just asking to hang out with friends both in and out of the game. Before I knew it, I was at the end of A Realm Reborn. As a birthday gift, my friend bought me the full game, and I was more than willing to subscribe. While the base game was enjoyable story-wise, I was completely unaware of how much this game would change me, my perception of loss, and shape my understanding of life and what it means to live. On December 12th, 2024, 2 days after my 22nd birthday and just over 5 weeks after the loss of my grandpa, I started Heavensward. Each installment of the Final Fantasy franchise touches upon some facet of the human condition and seeks to share a new outlook with the player. This approach is also evident in 14 in each of its expansions, giving the player food for thought with each addition to the game. The long-term format of 14 makes this extraordinarily effective. Rather than 25 to 40 hours with the cast, which would be the amount of playtime you would spend in any other mainline entry to get through the story, you spend hundreds of hours with the same characters, sharing their burdens, laughing with them, and knowing who they are beyond the archetypes they seem to be. The loss of Mourning hit hard, yes, but like most 14 fans, the death of haurchefant rocked my world. I'm a huge fan of Arthurian legends, particularly the French interpretations, so I predicted most of the big plot points and revelations of Heavensward. Losing haurchefant, though, came as a shock. I could not recall the last time I sobbed so hard over a game, save for 15. It felt like a real death, his final words reminding me too much of one of my last exchanges with my pop. When breaking the news to Edmond, I allowed myself to fully grieve my real loss for the first time in weeks. 14 has given me a sense of catharsis I've not experienced in a game before, let alone therapy. I was able to breathe and process the pain of these fictional losses and how they felt so terribly familiar. They're sudden, they're heart-wrenching, and they're beautiful. I've always had a complicated relationship with death. Its finality scares me, yet the culture surrounding it fascinates me. Those who've been watching my videos for a while know I regret not becoming a mortician, but above all else, I fear experiencing a second death. I'm petrified by the idea of my work, my passions, my life amounting to nothing, fizzling out when I die and leaving not even a memory behind to linger in this world. This was only intensified by watching my grandpa make peace with death, welcoming it while reflecting on his life in the hospital. He was such a light in my life and an endless source of joy and inspiration. He was creative and funny and clever and taught me so much about the world and myself. Drawing, baking, handicrafts, how to carry myself. I could never forget him. But I'm terrified that I will not leave the same legacy, taking the memory of me with me when I inevitably die. It was in Heavensward that my feelings began to change. Having lost haurchefant, and then so suddenly Ysael, I did not expect the game to make their deaths feel so meaningful. The fact that bits of haurchefant carry on with you hours and expansions later through dialogue and flashbacks and optional quests and monuments and what the Warrior of Light remembers. The fact that Ysael has a street named after her in the Imperium with a cute snowman, much like the one found in the Alcafa amphitheater, much like how you reminisce over her with Estinian all the way up into endwalker. You remember. This is when I began to realize the overarching theme and message of 14. Through the burdens we bear, through the pain we all share, we leave our legacies, no matter how small. No matter how much of you is forgotten to time, no matter the context that is lost or gained, you shall be remembered, and in this way you shall live on. This ultimately was the crux of Heavensward, with Emmerich's dedication to the past relationship between dragons and humans perfectly encapsulating it.
Brothers and sisters, ye who stand as witness, hearken unto me. Since the days of Eld, when the bonds betwixt man and dragon were sundered by our hand, our peoples have known only war. Bloodshed without end. Losses beyond counting, and still we fought. And still we fought. Some wounds do not heal. The dead cannot be returned to us. But we the living can yet choose another course. Here and now, we can lay down this burden, this hatred, this vengeance. Our forebears fought not so that we could die, but that we might live. So let us honor their sacrifice and spare our children this death sentence. Let us gift them a new legacy, life. Look now on the legacy we would leave to our children. A dream of peace, inscribed in stone for generations to come.
Father and his beloved, as they were so long ago, happy and at peace. The dream they shared shall be ours once more.
Even though Ysayle never truly channeled Shiva, it was her hope and dedication to remembering that brought the Dragon Song War to its end. The game completely transformed its talk to NPC quest by having the Warrior of Light bring memories back to life, asking beasts and dragons and their fellow man to reflect on times long past, on those who gave up their lives for the future. Though the lyrics of the Dragon Song may say, "For those who fight for naught," I found myself comforted through every little detail. The Dusk Vigil pays homage to 1.0 characters, for crying out loud. The first time I queued, someone hit the pray emote after he defeated Sir Ulrich, and I had to find out why. Through both the narrative and the community, Heavensward really plants these themes of legacies and carrying the torches for those we lose along the way through our actions and memories in a way I've never experienced. Stormblood dared to push this further, and I've never seen anyone speak about the way I feel about this expansion. While Heavensward implored me to remember for the sake of others, Stormblood grabbed me by the shoulders, shook me around, and told me to never dare forget who I am. Through my grief, the high-octane expansion was thrilling, but I was disarmed by its depth and complexity. I had been fortunate enough to play through the game entirely blind, but I found out quickly how many people wrote off Stormblood as a weak addition to the game story-wise. I'm not going to dissect its wonderful writing now, as that's its own essay, but both the protagonist and antagonist brought with them astonishing profundity that I think is terribly overlooked. Of the leading cast, I think Hien and Lys are the most blatant when I'm talking about. Hien's rousing speeches demand his people to not forget their roots as domans, to carry with them their pride and culture. No matter what monuments fall, no matter where they are, they have themselves and their customs.
The perseverance to endure decades of oppression. The will to carry on the legacy of those we have lost. These were the bonds that held us together and gave us the strength to reclaim our home. After 25 hard years, the shadow of the Empire no longer darkens these lands, and we may at last look forward to the dawning of a new day. But, my friends, it will be a day of work. So I ask you, have you yet the strength to stand? To rise up with me once more? Here and now? And begin to rebuild our homeland?
Lys, to a lesser extent, rejects the notion of forgetting the sacrifices made by her father and sister, carrying their legacies while begging her fellow Alamegans to not give up their identities to the Garlean Empire. Every facet of Alamigo had been colonized down to their national anthem, and yet Lys still clings onto her sense of self-actualization, ratifying her identity and heritage through direct action, killing any apathy in herself and those around her with her conviction. In stark contrast to these two are Yotsuyu and Xenos. They're nauseatingly terrible people, but with this horridness comes depth. Yotsuyu chose to forget, rejecting herself and her gentle nature to make herself into a monster, forgetting the plight of her people so she could depersonalize and cope with the disgusting and traumatic events she was forced to endure ever since her youth. Forgetting broke her, molded her into vengeance incarnate. And then, against her will, she forgot everything, becoming Tsuyu, reverting to the child she never got to be, showing that there was kindness in her, that there was love and care and tenderness and hope that she forced herself to abandon in order to survive. Because she was so out of touch with herself, when she was forced to remember her life as Yotsuyu was her undoing. Her death was heartbreaking and unfair. And I'll say it, I pity Xenos. He's a kicked puppy, a scorned son who grew up neglected, looking for a way to feel alive. He forgot his humanity, and he begs the Warrior of Light to do the same, to forget ourselves and those we love, to essentially play with him. His manic desires are born from his fragmented existence, as he too chose to forget what it is to live. I cried for him even when he selfishly took his own life in front of us. Unlike him, I will not forget who I am. Unstable though he is, his overzealousness and hunt for the meaning of his existence is something I will carry with me always. Interestingly, this facet of Xenos is what truly defines the next two expansions. Shadowbringers changed me as a person. There's no other way to put it. It took the formula established in A Realm Reborn and spun it into one of the most nuanced stories I've experienced in a long time, forcing me to face feelings I've pushed down for most of my life and tried to forget, tried to ignore, especially in the wake of 2024. It recontextualized story beats from hundreds of hours ago and broke my heart over and over and over again. Completing the now mandatory Crystal Tower raids made the Crystal Exarch's identity very obvious, and his reverence and dedication to remembering the past and you for your actions, for the lives you've touched, if even for a moment, set up for a scene that was simultaneously a punch in the gut and a warm hug.
Then this may be the last moment we have to ourselves for a while. Come, sit with me. Tell me, when all of this is over, what will you do? That would be well deserved. You might consider roaming Norvrand not as her savior, but as a simple sightseer. Viewed through such eyes, I am certain she would seem quite different. But whatever it is you decide to do, I have every confidence that you will do well. For you have the strength to forge your own path. You will leave countless lives better than you found them, and the souls you touch will never forget your kindness. Then, in trying times, when you question your worth and your choices, they will raise their voices to remind you of the difference you have made. And thus will your deeds come to affirm your path. Remember this.
As obvious as what G'raha said here may be, it was everything I needed to hear with the fears I have, with everything I dreaded and experienced in the past year. This conversation also mirrors the feelings, fears, and aspirations of a particular character. While this video is more intended to be a sentimental one, I would be remiss to ignore how powerful Ardbert's return was. It suited the story beautifully, truly making Shadowbringers feel like a return to a realm reborn while bringing the story to new heights. With how the Warriors of Darkness were sent off in Heavensward, I fully expected their return. Ardbert's reintroduction, though, was haunting. It was the last thing I had anticipated, and it played directly into my anxieties. To have sacrificed so much, to have given up every part of himself for what felt like meant nothing, to have his name tarnished and deeds misconstrued until he was not more than a ghost of himself, a hollow and hated idea haunting the story of the world he was once a part of. When even the memory of him was dead, he was revived through remembrance. Every exchange with everyone's favorite tulpa left me trembling as the Warriors of Light and Darkness reaffirmed each other, and in turn me. Being given so much guidance by Ardbert and bringing back his past while learning about his life and the first before the flood, all to restore the memory of him and his companions, not only push the narrative forward, but also set up his foil. One of the best written characters in all of fiction. It's really no secret that Emet Selch quickly became my favorite character in not only the game but any medium, because of the gut-wrenching depth and nuance of his characterization. If I'm being completely honest, I knew nothing about him, other than the fact that he was a foxy grandpa. His design alone captivated me long before I got into 14, and ever since I finished A Realm Reborn's post-content, I counted down how many quests I had until his introduction in Prelude and Violet. The lighting update was actually rolled out before I began Shadowbringers, I think a few months before, rendering his every micro-expression and wrinkle to a T, showing how worn and haggard he was despite the smarmy facade. From his very first moment on screen, he fascinated me. He never obfuscated his intentions or reasons, telling nothing but the truth when asked. The hunch of his back betrayed the weight of the burdens he chose to carry through the centuries, but the twinkle in his eye spoke volumes about the love buried deep in his heart. He's the hero of his own story. Though his methods are horrific and impossible to justify, you can sense and sympathize with his anguish. He was a good man once, and even as he finally tired of the Scions and how the Warrior of Light stood in his way, my heart ached for him. As he shot G'raha, I knew what I was going to be forced to do, and I couldn't stop sobbing. His pain was my pain, and
I'm sorry, Koneko-chan. I just wanted something to take my mind off of Raku-chan's pain. Her pain. It pains me to think about that pain.
And the loss I experienced made me feel incredibly attached to this terribly flawed man who committed every atrocity in the name of love. I lived through my own final days in 2024, and I too was tasked with remembering. Each crack of his voice, each selfish monologue about the bottomlessness of his grief, and the lengths he went to cling on to the past showed the boundless nature of his loneliness and despair. After the dying gasp, as Tomorrow and Tomorrow played, I was hit by a semi-truck of emotions as I saw him stand straight, as the lyrics sung from his perspective reminded me so much of Noctis's final words in 15. As he said what is ultimately the point of it all, of the life, of the game, of stories like these.
Yeah.
Remember. Remember us. Remember that we once lived.
When he told us his true name, it was driven by the sentiment behind his final words. As Hades died by my hand, a man consumed by the same fear of being forgotten I've dealt with my whole life, a man who was still, after millennia, mourning and suffering the same way I was. All he could do was break down. The deluge of emotions I had tampered down since my grandpa's diagnosis, what I had tried my best to manage since his passing in October, came pouring out of me for hours. I went to bed at nearly 6 a.m. the day I finished Shadowbringers. Hades' final smile as he tasked me with his legacy, healing me as much as it wounded me. I cannot cling onto the past, onto sorrow and regret, but I can live on. To remember, to carry the torches of those whose life had been extinguished. For those I've yet to meet, for those who want to remember me. No matter how short our lives are, every choice, every action leaves a legacy. Hades' final words only strengthened my conviction to pursue what I want, to write and exist and find love in every facet of my life. And to remember that I am only able to carry on because of someone who once lived.